Heidi came to VIMS to work on her dissertation, which she just finished up in December of 2010. She focused really with a global scale perspective on transport and fate of pollutants in the environment, but her specialty is the foraging ecology of top bird predators, and she worked looking at their role in food webs in Antarctica and how they are affecting the fate of contaminants. So she finished in 2010. She already has 2 publications, including one in the leading journal in her field, Environmental Science and Technology, and she tells me she has 3 more in the works. She was highly decorated while she was here as well. She was the recipient of a highly competitive EPA STAR Fellowship. She participated in the NSF GK12 Perfect program. She received some funds from the auction money that was raised, and she also received a VIMS fellowship from our general support pool. So she's up now as a legislative fellow through the Knauss program, and the legislative fellows are the most selective group in the bunch. It's the hardest position to get. She's working with the House Natural Resources Committee, the Subcommittee on Fisheries, Wildlife, Oceans, and Insular Affairs, and she's going to tell you some more about that. Thanks, Heidi Geisz.
Thank you so much. Thanks for that nice introduction, and thank you, Dr. Wells, for including me and inviting me to be a part of this. And thanks, members, for taking your time at your meeting here to listen to a little bit about life on the Hill from the perspective of a burgeoning scientist. I appreciate it. So I was just going to talk. I don't have a PowerPoint either. That's one thing that you learn first pop out of the box is to get away from the PowerPoint once you move toward the hill. But just sort of 3 parts. You know, how does VIMS, like an institution like VIMS, and particularly VIMS, honestly, prepare somebody for an experience like working on the Hill? And so there are 3 parts to the talk. I wanted to kind of think about the nuts and bolts. Just sort of like the basics of the scientific content. How does that prepared? My experiences here prepared me. And then the second part would be sort of the process of going through designing a project, that sort of thing, and how can that be transferred toward driving policy and working in that arena. And then the third part I like to call reality check. So starting in the first part, looking at the nuts and bolts, it can be somewhat obvious. I mean, essentially, I felt, coming into VIMS, I had about 5 years experience as a technician, but I really didn't have a context for that experience in terms of what the oceans are doing, what is the larger picture of the oceans, locally with the Chesapeake Bay, but certainly on a larger scale, we have a global program here. How do our oceans fit into the bigger picture of larger global scale problems, that sort of thing. And that's when we look at oceans and insular affairs on the Hill, we concentrate a lot on domestic and local issues, but we have 5 island territories as well. So I mean, we really look at oceans on a global scale. I mean, we have more ocean territory in this country than land territory. So in terms of our jurisdiction, so it becomes a huge and all-encompassing series of things to look at, and really, ecosystems and economic opportunities. And so I felt, coming to VIMS, we actually have a global perspective. They have excellent classes, and I felt like I had content to prepare me to carry the facts and the figures and that sort of thing, and really take the strategies and things that we come out of here in terms of learning and researching and ways to garner information, and then provide that to the policymakers, and sort of, I'm asked all the time to read over a document or a bill or something and say, okay, this is supposedly based on science. Tell me, is it true? And you look through it and just fact check it, in terms of, like, is that true? And I feel like, I have a wide capacity to be able to provide that, given my experiences in the arena here. And then sort of building on that is kind of that process of, particularly as a PhD student, designing a project from the ground up and understanding the logistics, the strategy of moving forward and encountering problems, encountering sort of difficulties and trying to move around those difficulties, or maybe plan for those difficulties and find that there is no such thing as planning for all of those difficulties. That is highly applicable on the Hill. you know, when we deal with that, I mean, I'll tell you the pace is definitely different. You know, you sort of take 5 years to do a project here, and you've got 10 minutes to come up with something on the hill, you know, when things are happening fast. You know, and I like to think about it, so as Linda had mentioned, I did my PhD work in the Antarctic, and so here at VIMS we actually garner federal grants as well, so we bring National Science Foundation funding in, and that's the primary source of my funding. And then to go spend time in the Antarctic. And I also, while I was doing the contaminant work for Rebecca Dickett and Hugh Duffel, I worked at, as she mentioned, with the seabirds, and I actually helped run the seabird project in the absence of the PI, the principal investigator for that program. He lives in Montana. He couldn't always make it down to Antarctica, which is fine by me, but I'll sit on a boat for as long as you want to put me out there. And so oftentimes I was sort of in the position to advocate for the seabird group, but we also had the invertebrate group and the bacteria group and the phytoplankton group. And the tie I'm making here is like they're sort of like stakeholders, right? You know, at the end of the day, we only have so much time to conduct our research. We have 6 weeks, say, in a winter Antarctic cruise. And you're up against weather, and you don't know what day to day what the weather's going to be like. You know, and you start sort of thinking about that in the context of the Hill in terms of how to solve problems, how to move forward, and how to work with other people, whether it's ecosystem components as stakeholders or, you know, a variety of economic variables that are unpredictable, a variety of ecosystem variables that are unpredictable, weather. I mean, we've just recently experienced that here in Gloucester for sure, you know, things that just happen and you have to kind of learn those strategies. So that's an excellent, you know, way in which I think we can be prepared for, as scientists, to work in that Hill arena. And then the third portion here of the talk is called reality check. And the reason I say that is because essentially, you know, policy is a highly value-laden arena. Everybody comes to the table with their sort of preconceived notions of, I mean, years of experience in whatever their field and that sort of thing, but just life experience and ideas about how the world works and how we should move forward in terms of our progress. And so it becomes interesting when you try to add in a piece such as science, which is inherently uncertain, and just by the nature of the way that science progresses, because we're moving it forward constantly, right? We're always there, call it the cutting edge for a reason. And so for somebody coming right out of a PhD program, just surrounded by all of this rich, good science that we do here, you know, I had a professor once that said, you know, as we move forward in all of these different sort of like arenas and trying to incorporate all these and solve these problems, science will carry us through. And, you know, I find that even though 99.99999, we like our numbers in science, percent of the science that reaches the policy level is really hard, factual, structured, robust, there's this perception of that which, you know, it enters into the equation on the part of many of the sometimes stakeholders and policymakers that this is just ephemeral, that it doesn't hold water, so to speak. And, you know, again, the professor that had told me, you know, science will carry us through, and that's not necessarily true unless, and that's my caveat, I mean, it's not necessarily true, that's the reality check bit, but the unless is, unless we as scientists learn to communicate those facts and figures and how we came about getting them, and engage with the public. And I think that's really what stands out at VIMS, because our programs here, like I was, as Linda mentioned, I was part of the GK through 12 program, and that puts us students in the school systems learning how to communicate. If you can communicate with a 14-year-old when they're, you know, busy drinking, they're like high-powered, you know, who knows what power drinks, you can communicate science to pretty much anybody, that kind of thing. And also, you know, we have Marine Science Day, and we engage with the public, we have talks. And not only are we bringing science to the community, that you know, the things that we're doing, we actually, what I think is really unique about this institution is that we bring the public into our questions that we ask. And we, you know, we seek information, we work with the watermen, they've been out there for 300 years, you know, looking at these waters, they know what's going on, we communicate with them and we work with them. And that can help us bring science to policy in a way that's effective because we're engaging our stakeholders. And so I think that that's a really powerful part VIMS and has really helped me to try to move forward on the Hill. And so I guess, and really to just wrap it up, I wanted to say that I'm one of 5 Knauss Fellows that are on the Hill from Virginia this year. We actually took the cake. We out of 43 total across the nation, 5 from Virginia. That says a lot. And almost every year we have somebody from VIMS who does that. So I think it really says a lot for this program that we're preparing students that are moving into, you know, certainly into the scientific arena and research, but also bringing that research and that information to the places where we can use it and move forward. So anyway, thank you so much.
So are you going to stay in the policy area? You come back to academia when you're...
That is the million-dollar question. So I'm about 3 months into the policy fellowship at this time. And, you know, my understanding is about 1/3 of the fellows that go through this program, nationwide, go back into science. And they say a 1/3 will go into government. And correct me if I'm wrong on this. And then you have 1/3 that sort of end up in maybe like a more research-oriented but government-type arena. So I'm not sure.
Well, for example, one of our former Knauss fellows, who actually was my student, Bruce Vode, is now in the upper level administrative staff for NOAA Chesapeake Bay program.
That's right.
So the NOAA Chesapeake Bay office up in Annapolis. So they come back and they still do policy, science, interface.
We get a lot of these fellows that end up in national NGO positions, so non-governmental kind of advocacy type positions, but some go back to academia. Now, for me personally, so that didn't really answer your question, I really like what I'm doing a lot, so we'll see. I had thought I would come back to academia, but I don't know, it might pull me away, because I feel really passionately about it. It's fun to see the things we're doing here at VIMS. For example, the marine debris program here. We were just able to push some legislation through that actually Ms. Whitman may talk about that as well, because you know, we in Virginia, the programs run through VIMS with the Ghost Pod program. It's an example for the nation on how to move forward with these kinds of programs, working with the community, cleaning up the ocean, you know, providing an economically viable area for us to work, and it's just really neat. It was really fun for me to be part of VIMS to be able to push that legislation through on a national level that you know can use Virginia as an example. So.
Heidi, thank you very much.
I'm Troy Hartley, Director of Virginia Sea Grant. We administer the Knauss Fellows. I think something that you guys as a council should really appreciate that, one, Heidi was probably one of the 1, 2, 3 top candidates nationwide this year. There are 40 to 50 Knauss Fellows every year for the last 30 years. These guys get into positions like this and they stay. Those alumni, they're running nowhere. So tapping and keeping in touch with these folks, I think, they're very in a really powerful position. And Virginia competes very, very well. You're right. We get 5 this year. No other state Sea Grant program beat this state, and so we get real quality in our students coming in, and that's an asset.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Heidi, thank you.